So I want to make a game, but first...
So I recently played Hollow Knight, and I want to make a MetroidVania. Why?
Metroidvanias are fun, and I think I could make one.
But what makes a game a Metroidvania? From what I've gathered, a Metroidvania consists of the following in order of importance: a large interconnected world, permanent power-ups that aid the player in combat, movement, and opening new areas, as well as a sense of isolation, exploration, and discovery.
Now, what makes a good Metroidvania is the lore and the atmosphere of the world that the player is exploring.
But that's subjective, artistic mumbo-jumbo that we'll figure out at some point. And with that, let's get prototyping. I'm using Game Maker because it's easy, and I can make some quality games with it. And boom, we got a box that jumps around other boxes. Bang, we got particles. Pop, we got enemies. Pow, a health bar and invincibility frames. And now we just need to be able to attack the enemies. And here's where a core mechanic decision comes in. See, I've made a Metroidvania before for a game jam, and the player attacked in the 4 cardinal directions with projectile orbs. But I want this game to be keyboard and mouse with hitscan bullets. The difference is, projectiles have a velocity and direction, so they take time to hit their target, where hitscan is an instantaneous collision, giving very fast feedback. It's like the bullets in Metroid Prime versus the bullets in CSGO.
I've never actually made hitscan bullets, so this is going to be a learning experience.
All you need to do is get the angle between the player and the mouse by using the point direction function, call it an arm angle, create a bullet instance that is only 1 pixel big, set its angle to the arm angle, and then gradually increase the size of the bullet or the X scale by a small increment while checking for collisions after each loop.
If the bullet collides with a solid, fade it out. If it collides with an enemy, do damage to that enemy, and then fade it out. Now here's the issue. I want the bullet to penetrate through a set number of enemies, and to do that, the bullet has to know what enemies it has already damaged so it doesn't lower the enemy's health multiple times, or know not to penetrate any further. Basic collision events don't do great with storing multiple instance IDs, and it gets pretty complicated. So I came up with an even more complicated solution.
If each square in this Excel spreadsheet represents 1 pixel in Game Maker, this pixel being the starting point of the bullet and this pixel being where the mouse was clicked, the angle from the horizontal is the arm angle, or theta. As the size of the bullet is increased, we need to check if any enemy instances are along the bullet line. Keep in mind that Game Maker will automatically round to the nearest pixel, so even though a straight line crosses through multiple pixels, only the nearest ones matter. So to find the X and Y locations to check for enemies, we use a little function called SOHCAHTOA.
But I thought we weren't going to use SOHCAHTOA after high school. Yeah, they lied to you.
The X location is the cosine of the arm angle times the size of the bullet, and the Y location is the same equation, but using sine. If an enemy is at that location, we check the list to make sure that we didn't already damage that specific enemy, and if not, we store its instance ID in the list. Then we damage the enemy and reduce the amount of enemies we can penetrate through by 1. Is that too complicated? Probably. But does it work? No. It took me about a week of figuring out if my math was wrong or if I was dumb, but I finally realized that I'd been using the instance place function to check for enemy collisions when I should have been using instance position. So here's the final bullet hit scan code in case you're curious. And it actually works! We can finally damage enemies! I've also added a couple more enemies to make the initial testing more interesting, but now it's time to figure out what the heck I want this game to be. I like the idea of an astronaut exploring an alien world because I can get infinitely creative with enemy designs, and it's definitely not ripping off the Metroid series. With that idea, I can finally start making some artwork for the game because, let's be honest, the blocks just aren't doing it anymore. I always grab a color palette from low spec because I'm not great at artistic jargon like color theory, and these palettes help create a cohesive art style. I know there are other pixel art editors like Sprite and Photoshop, but the Game Maker Sprite Editor is actually a pretty powerful tool for coming with the software, and that's mostly what I use. So let's start with the environment since it'll help aid the enemy designs and the whole feel of the world. I was thinking of going with a purple cave and diamond shapes with orange moss over it, just to start. And I think it does alright for now, and we can always go back and change it. The background is just a muted pattern of those same diamond shapes. For the player design, I loosely based it on the Boeing blue suit and the old-fashioned Apollo suits with the big golden helmet and life support backpack. I think it looks aight, and it fits in the game world pretty well, so I want to get some other mechanics out of the way, like a wall jump and a slide.
Maybe this could be a power-up that's unlocked later? Because, you know, MetroidVania. I also really like how the spikes work in Hollow Knight, where you're forced to respawn back in the nearest safe surface so you can get some pretty cool platforming sequences like the Path of Pain. So I recreated that mechanic, and it works flawlessly. With the bug gone and some spike art, it's time to add a lot more in. Like new enemy art. Check it out. We got a rhino looking thing that strafes back and forth. I call it a strafer. We got a booger looking thing that spits towards the player. I call it a spitter. We got an X-shaped floaty thing that spits in diagonal directions. I call it a diagonal spitter. We got a gel zap looking thing that seeks out the player. I call it a seeker. And we got these pin looking things that too seek out the player. I call them pin seekers. Oh, we also got this circle looking thing that spawns the pin seekers. I call it a pin spawner. I'm really creative. Now that we have some fun enemy art to fight against, we need a place to fight them. I'm talking about the map, like the interconnected world I mentioned before. Now there's an easy but lame way to go about this, or a complicated way that might end up being a nightmare to figure out. If each cell in this Excel spreadsheet is one room in a world map, the easiest way to build a map would be to create a matrix of game maker rooms, and if the player goes outside of a room in any direction, send them to the corresponding room in the matrix. But this means each room is limited to a specific size, and we want room diversity, like long rooms and chunky rooms included. The Metroidvania I showed before, made for a game jam, had rooms that were all the same size, which was fine since it was easy to implement, but since this game that I'm making is out of a limited time setting of a game jam, I really want to experiment more with the map design. So here's how I complicated it. If the player's on the right side of this room about to go to the next room over, to find that next room, we can use a script that searches through the world map in order to find the corresponding room to go to. However, if you see here, the Y location of the player in the first room is going to be different from the Y location of the player in the next room. We can call this the player's relative Y, which will change between different room heights, and we need to keep track of the player's global Y, which will stay the same between changing rooms. Also, keep in mind that the player's relative X and Y will change differently if we're changing rooms horizontally or vertically, so I made a script that accounts for all of that. With a lot of coding and debugging done, and a couple weeks of procrastinating on fixing the issues, it finally works the way it was intended. I also added a camera system with a parallax background, which was surprisingly easy to implement, so let me show you what I got so far. Even though it's just a start, I'm pretty proud with what I got so far. I haven't added any sound or music into the game, so as the background music plays out, I'm gonna add my own. Pew pew, huh, pew pew pew, huh, pew, huh, huh, pew pew, huh, pew, huh, pew 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 pew, pew 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 pew, huh. Pew pew huh pew pew huh pew 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 huh 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 pew 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 huh pew 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 huh huh pew huh huh pew huh 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 pew 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 huh pew 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 huh pew 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 huh pew 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 huh pew 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 huh huh pew pew huh 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 pew 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 huh pew 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 huh pew pew huh pew 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 huh 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 huh. Well, that's fun. Sorry you had to hear all that at the end, but thanks for watching. That was my first ever game jam game devlog video that I've made. I've never actually finished one before. I've tried a couple in the past, but this is my first time learning how to edit and really record everything. I also don't have a camera, so I'm just using my phone to record the video parts of it. But
Yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I might do more in the future. I definitely want to keep working on this game, but I do work full time, so stuff like this does take me a while to do. I didn't realize how much work goes into making and editing a video from start to finish. So that's that. Thank you.